My name's Jack Reynolds. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I had it pretty good. Not flashy good, not the kind of life you brag about at high school reunions or slap on a Christmas card. Just solid. Simple. I had a job I could depend on, assistant project manager at Hallcroft Development, a mid-sized construction firm that built half the office parks and shopping centers in the county. Not glamorous, but it paid the mortgage on time and kept the lights on. I had a little house, 2 used trucks in the driveway, and a dog named Rusty who thought I was the center of the universe. And I had Ellie, my wife of 11 years, the woman who used to look at me like I was the only man in a room full of kings. Ellie was smart, sharp-tongued, beautiful in a way that didn't need fixing. She worked in interior design, mostly commercial spaces, and Lord, she could walk into a bare drywall box and turn it into something you didn't want to leave. We weren't perfect. We bickered about dumb things like anyone else. But when she laughed, really laughed, the kind that made her snort a little through her nose, I always felt like the richest man on earth. At work, there was Mr. Caldwell, Thomas Caldwell. CEO, founder, self-made man. He had this presence, you know? Not loud, not cocky, just certain. Like the ground was steadier when he was around. Guys half my age were tripping over themselves to kiss up to him. But me? I respected the man. Earned it, you might say. Caldwell had pulled himself up from nothing, just like I was trying to do. Over the years, he'd taken me under his wing, gave me raises when I didn't ask, taught me the finer points of the business. Sometimes, I even thought of him like a second father, the kind of man you quietly hope to make proud, even if you'd never say it out loud. Home started to feel different around the time Caldwell began inviting me to more meetings, offering me bigger projects. It should have been a good thing. But Ellie, she started getting sharp with me. Short-fused. Little things would set her off, me leaving a coffee cup in the sink, me forgetting to bring in the mail. She stopped asking about my day, stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. Some nights, she'd stay late at work, but when she walked through the door, she didn't bring that worn-out, lipstick-smudged smile like she used to. No, she was wired tight, jittery. Like she'd just come from somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, but couldn't quite shake it off. I told myself it was stress. Her firm had been angling for some big accounts. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe we were both tired. After all, wasn't that just life? The shine comes off, but you keep showing up. You keep believing. One night, I came home from a late site meeting. Rusty didn't come bounding to the door like he usually did. The house was dark except for a low light in the kitchen. Ellie was sitting at the table, wine glass in hand, staring into nothing. She didn't even notice me at first. When she finally looked up, there was something hollow in her eyes, like a stranger was sitting inside her skin. "You're late," she said, her voice flat. I shrugged, trying to keep it light. Caldwell needed me to walk him through the Baker project. "Sorry, babe." She didn't say anything, just tipped her glass back and drained it. I stood there, keys still in my hand, heart sinking a little. The air in the room was too still, like the moments right before a summer storm when the birds go silent, and you know, deep down, something's coming. But I shook it off, told myself not to make a big deal out of nothing. After all, I had a good job, a beautiful wife, a life that was still, by all measures, lucky. Didn't I? I dropped my keys in the bowl, kissed her on the forehead, she barely flinched, and went upstairs. Rusty followed me, whining low in his throat. And even though every hair on my neck stood up, even though some small stubborn voice inside me whispered, "Jack, look closer," I pulled the covers up, turned out the light, and chose, for one more night, to believe the house was still whole. I always figured love was like a house. You build it, you fix it when it leaks, you patch the cracks before they turn into something bigger. But no one tells you what to do when the whole damn foundation starts to shift under your feet. It didn't happen all at once with Ellie. It was slow, like the way a windshield spiderwebs after a tiny chip, fine one day, and the next you're staring through a mess of fractures wondering when exactly it all went wrong. She started small. A jab here, a sigh there. I'd come home proud after solving a mess at work, a subcontractor trying to cut corners, and tell her about it, expecting maybe a little smile. That's my guy. Instead, she'd just arch an eyebrow and say, "Great, Jack. You fixed someone else's mess for a paycheck that barely keeps us in Target furniture." One night, after a long day pulling overtime on the Martin project, I brought home takeout, thinking it'd be a nice surprise. She took one look at the paper bags and wrinkled her nose like I'd brought home roadkill. "Fast food? Again? God, Jack, how do you expect to get anywhere eating like a 12-year-old? It didn't matter what I did. She found fault in everything, my job, my clothes, even the way I cut the lawn. You just don't have any ambition, she muttered one night while folding laundry with quick, angry hands. You're content being nobody. That one stuck, lodged in my chest like a splinter. So, like a fool, I doubled down. I started working longer hours, skipping lunch breaks to hammer out budgets and project plans. I volunteered for late site inspections. I polished every spreadsheet until it sparkled. If proving I could be somebody was what it took, I'd do it. I'd do it for her. For us. Funny thing was, Caldwell noticed. He started calling me into meetings with the board. Started asking my opinion in front of guys who used to treat me like the help. You've got good instincts, Jack, he said one afternoon, clapping me on the back in the parking lot. Keep it up. Big things coming your way. I drove home that night with something I hadn't felt in months humming in my chest. Hope. Maybe if I got that promotion, if I finally crossed into the real man category Ellie seemed to be measuring me against, things would turn around. Maybe she'd see me again. Not the screw-up husband she was stuck with, but the man she married. The house was dark when I pulled in. Rusty met me at the door with his usual tail-wagging enthusiasm, but Ellie was nowhere to be seen. I found her in the living room, curled up in the corner of the couch, her face lit by the pale glow of her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in. Hey, I said, dropping my keys on the table. Guess what Caldwell said today? She hummed, still staring at the screen. Her fingers tapped out something fast, urgent. And then, God help me, she smiled. Not the tight little smile she'd been throwing me lately. A real smile. A smile like I'd barely remembered. I froze. Who's that? I asked, trying to sound casual. Trying not to let the dread creep into my voice. She jumped a little, then locked the screen so fast it was like a reflex. Too fast. Nobody, she said, flashing me a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Just Lacey. From the firm. She's dating this guy who's a total train wreck. You wouldn't believe the drama. She laughed, high and sharp, but it was a laugh too clean, too ready. Like a laugh rehearsed in a mirror. I nodded, pretending I believed her. Pretending I didn't notice how stiff her shoulders got, how she tucked the phone under the throw pillow when she thought I wasn't looking. Pretending was becoming a full-time job these days. I told her about Caldwell, about the maybe promotion. She smiled politely, said, "That's nice, Jack, the way you congratulate a 6-year-old for coloring inside the lines." And then she said she was tired and went upstairs without another word, leaving me there alone with my cold takeout and a pit the size of a wrecking ball settling in my gut. Rusty laid his head on my knee, whimpering soft like he knew something too. I stroked his ears, staring at the dark stairs where she'd disappeared, and told myself, again, that I was overthinking it. That everything was fine. That cracks in glass only mattered if you let them spread. But somewhere deep down, a voice I didn't want to hear whispered, "It's already spreading, Jack. And you're too late to stop it." Funny how your mind tries to protect you. It gives you excuses, explanations, anything to keep you from seeing what's right in front of your face. That was me for the next few weeks, the king of rationalization. Ellie started taking more calls at night, her voice low and tight, shutting herself up in the bathroom like she was plotting the Normandy invasion. I told myself it was work stress. New client, probably needy. Then there were the weekends she needed time to recharge. The solo trips to the spa. The sudden interest in yoga retreats, even though the last time she tried yoga, she pulled a hamstring and cursed downward dog straight into hell. Still, I kept believing. Because that's what love does to a man who spent years building a life brick by brick. It makes him stupid. It makes him stay. Meanwhile, at work, Caldwell, my boss, my supposed mentor, started asking little questions he hadn't before. "You and Ellie doing all right?" he asked one afternoon, standing too close at the site, his Rolex catching the sun like a flashbulb. "Yeah," I said, a little too quick. "Why?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "Just noticed she looked a little tense last time we bumped into each other. Hope she's not riding you too hard at home, Jack." "Women, huh?" He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder a little harder than necessary. I forced a laugh back, but it stuck in my throat. I didn't know then if it was the words or the way he said them, too casual, too knowing, but something in me twitched like a bad wire sparking to life. Still, I told myself he was just being friendly, making conversation, because the alternative was something too ugly to face. Until the night I couldn't pretend anymore. It was a Thursday. I came home late after a project meeting ran long. The house was dark except for the blue light of the living room TV, playing some reality show on mute. Ellie was there, curled into the corner of the couch, her face once again buried in her phone. She didn't hear me come in. I stood there for a minute, just watching. And then the screen lit up in her hand, and I saw it. Clear as day. A message from a contact saved simply as TC. Can't wait to taste you again. Thinking about Monday still has me hard. You're addictive, babe. The blood in my veins turned ice. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. She giggled, like some teenager sneaking calls after curfew, and started typing back fast, thumbs flying. Without thinking, without breathing, I stepped closer. Another message popped up before she could answer. Missing you already. Same place next week? My heart hammered so hard I thought she might hear it. And then, almost like a final nail being driven through my ribs, the name that signed the bottom of the next message. Tom. Tom Caldwell. My boss. My mentor. The man I trusted, admired, damn near worshipped. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, feeling something tear loose inside me. Ellie finally sensed me the way animals sense predators too late. She jumped, twisting around on the couch, her phone clutched tight like it could shield her from what was coming. Her mouth opened, some excuse already forming on her lips, but it didn't matter anymore. The house was already burning, and I was standing right in the middle of the flames. For a long second, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of the TV buzzing in the background, Rusty pacing nervously by the stairs, and the two of us staring at each other like strangers caught at a crime scene. Finally, Ellie broke the silence, not with an apology, not with tears, but with a scoff. A dry little laugh like I had just tripped over my own shoelaces. Oh, grow up, Jack, she said, shaking her head like she was disappointed in a particularly stupid child. I stepped closer, phone still burning in my memory, feeling my voice crack against my own ribs. How long? She shrugged, as casual as flipping through a clearance rack. Couple of months. Longer if you count the flirting. You were too busy playing blue-collar hero to notice. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off with a sneer. Save it, Jack. You think being dependable is enough? You think loyalty buys you anything? God, you really are pathetic. The words hit harder than any slap could have. I was shaking, not from anger, not yet, but from something colder. Something like standing barefoot on ice, watching everything you'd built crack apart. You're sleeping with Caldwell, I said, the words tasting like blood in my mouth. Sleeping? She laughed, full and ugly this time. Jack, honey, he's not exactly making me wait. She stood up, brushing invisible lint from her jeans like dusting me off her life. And if you think you can run crying to anyone about it, she said, her voice turning low and sharp, just remember who signs your checks. I stared at her. You'd ruin me? She smiled, not kindly, not sadly, but with pure, venomous pleasure. Ruin you? Jack, I'd get you fired so fast your head would spin. Caldwell owns the board. HR would back him before you even finished whining about betrayal. She leaned closer, her breath hot with cheap wine. All you'd end up with is a pink slip and a bad reference. Maybe then you can live your little mediocre dream full time. She grabbed a duffel bag from behind the couch, when I hadn't even seen her pack, slung it over her shoulder, and whistled low for Rusty. The dog didn't move. He sat stiff by my side, low growl rumbling in his chest. She clicked her tongue. Figures, she muttered, throwing the door open. You'll hear from my lawyer, she called over her shoulder, already texting someone, probably Caldwell, as she walked into the night. I stood there in the doorway, the cold air rushing in around me, feeling the world tilt sideways. The next day, I went into work because, what else do you do? Pride makes fools out of men. And I was still fool enough to think maybe, just maybe, there was some misunderstanding left to fix. Caldwell called me into his office before lunch. He didn't even pretend. No small talk. No phony smiles. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled under his chin like some cartoon villain. Jack, he said, you're a smart guy. I'd hate to see you throw your career away over personal drama. I said nothing. Just stared at him, the man I'd once admired, trying to reconcile the polished surface with the rot underneath. You've got a good thing here, he continued smoothly. Steady paycheck. Benefits. Future. Don't make the mistake of thinking personal mistakes entitle you to blow that all up. His meaning was clear. Crystal. If I made noise about him and Ellie, he'd destroy me. Quietly. Legally. Completely. I left his office feeling like I was walking underwater. Everything muffled, distorted. That night, the house was empty. Quiet in a way it had never been before. Rusty lay at my feet, whining now and then, ears perked every time a car drove by. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. The house smelled like her perfume, faint but stubborn, clinging to the walls. Every room, every piece of furniture, reminders of a life that had been hollowed out right under my nose. I wasn't just betrayed. I was humiliated, beaten in my own home, outmaneuvered at my own job. And the worst part? I hadn't even seen it coming. Days passed, or maybe it was weeks. Hard to tell when your life folds in on itself like a dying star. I stopped keeping track of time, stopped shaving. Meals turned into cold cans of soup, half-finished sandwiches forgotten on the counter. Some nights I didn't even bother with that, just cracked open another beer and stared at the ceiling until the room tilted around me. Sleep came in fits. Rusty would lay his head on my lap, whimpering when the nightmares woke me. Dreams where Ellie's laughter echoed from behind locked doors. Dreams where Caldwell's face twisted into something monstrous. Mornings were the worst. The sun would pour through the blinds, bright and merciless, lighting up everything she left behind, the framed pictures on the wall, the wedding china we never really used, the dried-up plants she always swore she'd water tomorrow. At work, the walls closed in tighter. Caldwell made good on his silent threat, subtle but lethal. Projects I'd spent months managing were reassigned without warning. Meetings happened without me. Emails went unanswered. People who used to joke with me in the break room now gave me tight, apologetic smiles and ducked their heads. They knew. Everyone knew. The whispers followed me like smoke. He pissed off Caldwell. His wife left him for the boss. Dead man walking. I clocked in and out like a ghost, waiting for the day they'd hand me a cardboard box and a security escort. It would have been a mercy, really. Meanwhile, Ellie found new ways to twist the knife. Little texts would pop up out of nowhere, like clockwork, just when the bleeding had started to clot. I'm so much happier now, Jack. Tom knows how to take care of me the way you never could. You're lucky I'm not asking for more in the divorce. Some nights I threw my phone against the wall just to hear something break. But it never helped. The silence that followed was worse than the messages. I stopped answering friends' calls. Stopped visiting my folks. I told them I was fine. I lied like it was second nature now. Nobody wants to hear a grown man cry into his beer anyway. Truth was, I barely recognized myself. One night, I found myself sitting in the garage, engine running, doors closed. The truck idled low, rumbling like a tired old animal waiting for the end. My hand shook on the steering wheel. It would be so easy, some ugly voice whispered. So easy to just let go. No more pain. No more shame. No more waking up alone in a house full of ghosts. But then Rusty barked. Sharp. Panicked. Scratching at the garage door like he was trying to tear it down. And somehow, that sound, frantic, desperate, alive, punched through the fog. I shut off the engine. Slammed the door so hard it rattled the walls. I dropped to my knees on the cold concrete, gasping for air like a man who'd been drowning without even realizing it. Rusty licked my face, whining, his tail thumping against the floor in frantic relief. I wrapped my arms around him and let the sobs come, raw and ugly and full of everything I'd been trying to outrun. And when they finally stopped, when the shaking finally eased, I sat there in the dark, one hand buried in Rusty's fur, and made a promise. No, I wasn't going out like this. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction. They wanted me broken, humiliated, forgotten. They would not get it. Maybe I couldn't fix the past. Maybe I couldn't win the old battles. But there was still a future, battered and bloodied maybe, but mine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wanted it back. Strength doesn't come back all at once. It doesn't hit you like a bolt of lightning. It creeps in slow, one stubborn breath at a time. First thing I did was simple. I cleaned the house. Not the kind of cleaning you do when you're expecting company. The kind you do when you're gutting something dead and starting fresh. I tossed the pictures. Boxed up the memories. Hauled out the dishes she loved but never washed. I scrubbed the smell of her perfume out of the closets. Hauled her old clothes to the curb without ceremony. Rusty followed me from room to room, tail wagging a little more each day, like he could sense the poison draining from the walls. Second thing I did, I stopped waiting for the axe to fall at work. If Caldwell wanted me out, he wasn't going to get the satisfaction of kicking me down the stairs. I'd walk out the front door, head high, and take every ounce of my dignity with me. I spent 2 nights writing my resignation letter, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it right. When it was done, it was simple, sharp, and clean, like a good blade. To whom it may concern. Effective immediately, I hereby resign from Hallcroft Development. I'm grateful for the skills I've learned and the opportunities I've had. Loyalty and honor matter to me, not just when convenient, but when it costs something. I leave with my values intact. I hope, for the sake of the company's future, that others learn to value the same. Sincerely, Jack Reynolds. I printed it out, signed it in ink, and slid it into an envelope. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in a cheap suit of armor, but in the work boots and button-down I started with all those years ago. The man I was before titles and salaries got tangled up with who I thought I was supposed to be. When I walked into Hallcroft for the last time, the place felt smaller. Grubbier. Like someone had turned on the lights at the end of a bad party. A few people looked up when they saw me. A few quickly looked away. Cowards. I didn't care. I dropped the envelope off with the HR manager, shook his hand like a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and turned toward the door. Of course, Caldwell had to get in one last shot. He intercepted me by the elevators, grinning like a cat who thought it still owned the mouse. Well, he said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. Finally realized you're not management material, huh? I looked at him for a long moment. No anger. No heat. Just nothing. He was already smaller than I remembered. Petty. Fragile. A big man wrapped in cheap bravado. I gave him a polite smile. No. I realized I'm too good to waste another minute around men like you. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, turned to face him as they slid shut. And that was it. No screaming. No drama. No security escort. Just a clean break. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. It filled my lungs better than it had in months. I didn't have a backup plan. No safety net. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't dragging a corpse of a life behind me. I was free. I walked to my truck, Rusty wagging his tail from the passenger seat, and pulled away without looking back. The road ahead was cracked and uncertain. It would be harder, uglier, slower, but it would be mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Freedom, it turns out, is a hell of a lot heavier than it looks. The first few weeks after quitting were rough. Real rough. I burned through most of my savings just keeping the lights on and Rusty fed. I picked up whatever work I could find, hauling scrap metal for a guy who always paid cash, helping an old contractor rebuild a crumbling porch, even doing some part-time warehouse shifts stacking pallets until my back screamed for mercy. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of thing you post about online with a #blessed hashtag. But it was honest. And every dollar felt better than the biggest check Caldwell ever signed with that smug, manicured hand of his. Nights were hard. I won't lie. The house felt too big without all the noise of the life that used to be. Some evenings I'd find myself sitting on the porch, a beer sweating in my hand, Rusty snoring at my feet, staring at the empty driveway and wondering how the hell it had all spun out so fast. But then I'd remember that garage door, the engine idling, and I'd remember I was still breathing, still standing. And that counted for something. Word about Hallcroft started leaking out slowly, like water under a cracked dam. Old buddies from the job site would text now and then. You heard Caldwell lost the Mason project? 3 managers quit last month. Place is a dumpster fire. Boards breathing down Caldwell's neck. Karma's catching up with him, huh? ****. I didn't ask for these updates. They just found me. And I won't pretend it didn't feel good. Hearing about the empire Caldwell had built on lies starting to rot from the inside out. Apparently, after I left, things got sloppy. Clients got nervous. Projects stalled. The cracks I'd been patching for years, quietly, invisibly, split wide open without me there holding it all together. Turns out, loyalty and honor don't just make you a good man. Sometimes they make you the only thing holding up the whole damn building. Meanwhile, Ellie, well, she couldn't resist broadcasting her downfall in real time. Her social media, once all shiny filters and fake smiles, started slipping too. Posts about spa weekends and boat days with Tom gave way to cryptic little complaints. Some people only care about themselves. Funny how promises don't pay the bills. Starting over is hard, but necessary. Wish me luck. I didn't comment. Didn't like. Didn't even show up in the views if I could help it. Because the truth was, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to dance on their ashes. Watching them fumble, watching the castle they torched their lives for crumble into dust, that was enough. More importantly, I had my own house to rebuild. One piece at a time. I wasn't there yet. Not by a long shot. But every busted knuckle from hauling scrap, every sunrise scene from the loading dock, every honest dollar in my pocket, it was laying the foundation for something better. Something real. And this time, it would be built to last. It happened faster than I expected. 1 minute Caldwell was still hanging on, slick as an oil stain in the rain. The next, it was like someone cut the strings and the whole puppet show crashed into the dirt. Hallcroft Development filed for bankruptcy. Not the neat, restructuring kind you announce with a press release and a brave face. No, this was the messy, bloody kind. Fraud investigations. Lawsuits from clients whose projects were half-built and rotting in the sun. Vendors unpaid. Employees scrambling for unemployment checks. Word spread fast. News outlets picked it up within days. Local construction giant Hallcroft Development collapses amid scandal. CEO Thomas Caldwell silent as investigations mount. Silent. Imagine that. The man who once loved to hear himself talk reduced to nothing but a headline and a grainy mugshot from a rushed press conference. His empire was ashes. His respectable friends disappeared faster than roaches when the lights come on. They seized his cars, his properties, even that ridiculous lake house he used to brag about like it was Buckingham Palace. And Ellie? She was right there in the wreckage with him. Turns out, chasing a dollar-sign dream doesn't buy you a parachute when the plane goes down. Her social media went from passive-aggressive jabs to straight-up desperation. Anyone know of a room for rent? Immediate need. Please DM. Hard times are temporary, right? Folded hands. Some people really showed their true colors. Alone but staying strong. Pictures of fancy dinners and boat parties disappeared, replaced by blurry selfies in borrowed cars and second-hand clothes. The ring Caldwell bought her, the one she used to flash like a trophy, gone. Pawned, probably. Or stolen. Who cared? She even posted a fundraiser, a half-hearted attempt to crowdsource her way back to comfort. Fell on hard times. Anything helps. Red heart. I didn't donate. Didn't comment. Didn't even so much as share it in a group chat for a laugh. It would have been easy to humiliate them. Real easy. I could have screenshotted everything, plastered it around town, sent it to old coworkers, even reached out to a few journalists hungry for dirt. But I didn't. Because real power isn't proving how much you can hurt someone. It's knowing you could, and choosing to walk away. Their ruin was public enough. Their shame loud enough. They didn't need my hand on the back of their heads, pushing them deeper into the mud. I watched it all from a distance, arms crossed, heart steady. Not gloating, not raging, just cold, clean satisfaction. Rusty sat by my side on the porch one evening while I scrolled past Ellie's latest "Please Help" post. He thumped his tail once, then went back to sleep. Good boy. We were done with that life. Done with chasing things that were never worth catching. I closed my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let the night settle around me. Tomorrow was a new day. And for the first time in a long, long time, it was mine to build. The thing about rock bottom is, once you stop fighting it, you realize it's solid ground. I found the new job about 3 months after Hallcroft's collapse, a small local construction company that specialized in municipal contracts. Not glamorous. No suits, no catered lunches, no fancy titles. But the work was honest. The pay was fair. The people were good. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to check my back every 5 minutes for knives. I was back on job sites, hands dirty, boots worn thin, helping real crews build things that would last longer than any smug executive's reputation. Schools, community centers, bridges that would still be standing long after my name was forgotten. It wasn't much to some people, but to me, it was everything. The old habits came back slowly, in good ways. I started meeting up with a few of the guys from the old days. Fishing trips that were mostly just sitting around lying about fish we didn't catch. Coffee after Sunday services. Helping a neighbor patch a roof just because it felt good to be needed again. Even Rusty seemed to walk a little taller these days. As for dating, well, I dipped my toe back in. Nothing serious. Just a few coffees, a couple of quiet dinners. I wasn't looking for fireworks. Wasn't looking for someone to patch over the holes. I was looking for peace. Connection. Something real, slow, and human. And you know what? I found it. No grand declarations. No fireworks. Just easy conversation. Laughter that didn't feel forced. The kind of smile across the table that reminds you life isn't finished with you yet. I wasn't rushing toward anything. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't running from something either. One evening, I sat on the porch with Rusty at my feet, a cold beer sweating in my hand, and I thought about it, all of it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the cold nights, the loneliness that sank into my bones. And I realized something simple and powerful. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought mattered to find out what actually does. Sometimes you have to watch it all burn to the ground. The marriage, the career, the dreams you thought were written in stone, just to see that you're still standing, still breathing, still building. The life I had before, it wasn't life. It was a cage dressed up as comfort. Now I was free. Scarred maybe, a little battered around the edges, but free. And damn if that didn't feel better than any promotion or hollow marriage ever could. Dear viewer, thank you for your invaluable viewing. We will be very grateful for your likes, subscriptions, comments, and sharing our story. See you soon.